Hi, I'm Shidoshi Jeffrey Miller, founder and director of Warrior Concepts International. I'm also the author and creator of the Science of Self-Defense home study materials. I'm a former federal police officer, undercover drug and black market suppression investigator, private detective, and bodyguard. Now again, I'm not telling you these things to impress you. I'm telling you these things to impress upon you that an instructor who's teaching self-defense needs to have real-world experience and not just beliefs and theories about what works and why it should work. Okay? Somebody needs to have this experience, and with my background, that's what I'm bringing to the table. In this special video training series, we're going to explore the science of self-defense. Ideas about self-defense. There are ideas in there, but we want to make sure that this stuff is firmly grounded in scientific fact, not fiction. So over the course of these video lessons, I'm answering some of the most commonly asked questions about self-defense. But what I'm also doing is I'm going to be suggesting questions that you should be asking, and topics you should be learning if you're going to survive a real-world attack from an assailant who wants to beat, break, or even kill you. So today's topic is, do you have to study martial arts to learn self-defense? Or, sometimes it's asked a little bit differently, what's the difference between martial arts and self-defense? So, just very briefly, here's a brief history of martial arts. And the history of martial arts is as old as the history of mankind. The word martial implies anything having to do with fighting or warfare. From the time that man has been able to learn from his mistakes and the mistakes of others, martial systems have been developed to pass on the knowledge and ideas that he learned for staying alive in the face of danger. However, as time went on, the martial arts, especially as they're practiced here in the West, became stylized and even transformed into sports and even methods for exercise and enlightenment. What we have then are really 2, 3, or more different forms of martial arts. So the questions, do you have to take a martial art to learn self-defense, or what's the difference between martial arts and self-defense? These questions are really born out of a lack of understanding where history is concerned. And that's all right. The point isn't in knowing history, but in knowing what you're looking at when you're evaluating programs. So, as I talked about in another video in this series, the answer to our question lies not in the class that we're in, but in the intent and primary purpose of that class. So as a review, we need to understand what self-defense is not to help answer our questions. As we discussed before, among other things, self-defense is not a sport, it's not a tough guy contest, it's not a game, and it most certainly is not fair. Okay? So in this martial arts versus self-defense arena, often what we find being offered as self-defense classes are either thinly veiled martial arts classes teaching the same lessons to everyone, regardless of whether they want to learn a martial art or they're there to learn self-defense skills. To these instructors, it's all the same. Excuse me. Or they're an attempt to teach basic tricks for escaping from grabs and other such attacks, or they're an informal class teaching these tricks without uniforms, belts, or the normal trappings you'd find in a martial arts school. Either way, I think the answer to our questions comes down to more than what the training looks like in the way of dress code or techniques. It comes down to understanding what we need, understanding what we're going to be up against. Until you understand what it is that you're going to have to deal with, it's almost impossible to understand what you need to deal with that. If you don't know how the engine in a car is put together, or how the pieces fit, or how they're held in place or anything like that, it's almost impossible to bring the right tools to the job. Now, I guess you could lug an entire tool chest out there and hope that you have the right things, but with the right understanding about how things and what you're going to be dealing with when you get there, it's real easy to make sure that you have the right tools. So let's forget about the separate terms for a moment. Instead, let's focus on why we're training a certain way in the first place. So, regardless of whether we're talking about martial arts or a so-called self-defense class, here's some thoughts. If the focus of the techniques or lessons is on getting ready for a competition or a tournament, dealing with ancient attacks instead of modern ones, if the training is focused on kid-like games, or anything other than defending against modern attackers throwing attacks that you'd most likely have to defend against. And I'm talking about attackers that are probably bigger, stronger, faster, more skilled, know stuff that you don't know, and they're not there to pat you on the back afterwards and go, hey, good technique. Okay? If that's what we're talking about, the class is probably not teaching self-defense. I don't care what's on the brochure. Along the same lines, if the class is teaching how to escape, evade from, or avoid bigger, faster, stronger, better armed attackers, with you being the underdog, just like you'll be in a real situation, not to mention against things like multiple attackers, etc., the class is probably focused on self-defense. Even if they're wearing traditional martial arts uniforms, using a colored belt or ranking system, or teaching traditional techniques that have been passed down for hundreds of years. Just because it was created 400 years ago doesn't mean it doesn't have applications today. It's not that it doesn't have applications, it's probably that it shouldn't be still being used against a 16th century attack. All right? We want to make sure that the techniques that are being passed down and that we're still using still work against somebody throwing a good old right cross that you're going to see 98% of the times here on the streets in the West. So the ultimate answer to answer the question is, to the question, do you have to study martial arts to learn self-defense? The answer is, of course, no, you don't. Just don't confuse martial arts and self-defense as being different things any more than you should confuse the fact that a class being marketed as a self-defense class is actually going to be preparing you to defend yourself. And in a later video we'll be talking about some things that you should be looking for when you're exploring or when you're checking out a class, including the instructor's credentials. And I don't mean how many trophies they have or what letters they have after their name or whatever. I'm talking about background and experience, because only those people who have actually been there, or people who have been taught directly by somebody who's been there, probably have the keys that you need to get out of that situation yourself. So it's confusing, I know, but that's the point of this video series. Okay, to teach you how to think about self-defense properly and to get the information and training you need. If you like this video and want to learn more about what it takes to really be safe in today's often dangerous world, I'd like to give you 20 more videos absolutely free. Just go to www.warrior-concepts-online.com/self-defense self-defense-videos.html. Register and I'll give you 20 more. Okay?